to each other or talk about the weather or what?
I think introductions would be a good idea. We can add them as they come in.
Well, Jane, why don't you start?
Sure. I'm Jane Laping, and I'm the current leader of the Presbytery of Western North Carolina Earth Care team, and that is who is sponsoring this conversation tonight. And both, well, George and John and Bill are part of that group, and
Christina.
Christina. And we'd love to have any more of you who'd like to be part of it to join us. So I attend First Presbyterian Church in Asheville. And mostly what I do is faith environment work. So I lead the creation care team at our church. And I also am the coordinator for a national organization that I hope all of you have heard of called Presbyterians for Earth Care.
Okay, thank you. Jonathan, why don't you go ahead? We'll get the Earth Care team introduced.
Sounds good. I'm John Ward. I'm an elder at First Presbyterian of Burnsville. And if you're not familiar where Burnsville is, it's up in one of the border counties, Yancey County. So we're north and east of Asheville. Lovely spot. We are not an official Earth Care church. There's a lot of concern in our church for things like caring for low-income people in the community, of whom we have a lot, working with reconciliation ministries on things like food and fuel and that kind of thing. So we have a lot of things on our plate, and I come to this partly because I'm an environmental toxicologist. I'm retired from a major medical school in Southeast Texas. I knew Jane back in her Houston days when she was the creator of Mothers for Clean Air, and I was a professor worrying about clean air. So here we are.
Thank you. Christina, how about you introduce yourself now, please?
Okay. All right. I am Christina Teterow. I am a minister here in this presbytery. I'm currently just on break. I'm not serving a congregation. I'm worshiping at Montreat Presbyterian, and I am, I guess, the most recent member of the Earth Care team for the presbytery, as well as being a member of the Earth Care team at Montreat. And so I'm just glad to be here and glad that we're starting to have these conversations. I'm greatly concerned about the environment and climate change and the future that we're creating and going to be leaving to future generations. So I'm very grateful for this committee and for this group as a whole who's having the same concerns as I am.
Thanks, Christina. Bill Muir is also a member of the Earth Care team. Bill, would you mind introducing yourself, please?
Yeah, I'm Bill Muir from Unity Presbyterian in Denver, just north of Charlotte. I've been working with Jane for about 3 or 4 months. Well, it'll be longer than that now, 9 months, to help put the team together, and we're working on the development of getting the team details like the web page and those kind of things put together. Personally, I'm a retired construction manager from DuPont. I've done mostly international projects and pretty much all over the world. It's good to be back in the United States, retired in North Carolina. I'm pretty much a full-time gardener right now. That's all.
Are you getting enough water from the summer rain?
Well, the water has come at strange times. I planted my tomatoes several weeks late and hit the drought pretty well. But now that the rain's here, the tomatoes are splitting. So we're having a lot of challenges, but it's interesting.
Thank you, Bill. Let's see, I think I'm the other member of the Earth Care team who's on tonight. Beverly and I moved to Black Mountain about a year and a half ago. We were doing transformation coaching in Coastal Carolina Presbytery for several years. Before that, I was on the faculty of the Interdenominational Theological Center in Atlanta. That's where I knew Cam. And I've been interested in Earth Care issues for many, many years. Since I've kind of given you a nod, Cam, why don't you say a few things to introduce yourself, please?
Sure, I'm Cam Murkison. I'm in this meeting because I'm on Jane's team at First Pres, and though she may not know it, I'm also on Christina's team at Monterey Pres. I've tried to work with both of those congregational Earth Care teams, and I've been collaborated with Jane on other projects we've done in the Presbytery in the past, and glad that this conversation is getting underway today.
Thank you, Cam. We'd like to get introductions from others. I can either call you out arbitrarily or randomly, or do what I often call the American free-for-all, which is whoever speaks up next goes. If you don't have a preference, I'll just randomly pick people. Robin?
Sure. I'm Robin Stiles, a member of Black Mountain Presbyterian Church and a member of the Earth Care team there. I care a lot about the environment. We personally have a Volt electric vehicle that we've been loving and driving for about a year. And we also have solar panels on our house, and we're excited that Black Mountain has them on their roof, and just working with our Earth Care team to do what we can to spread the word in the congregation, especially about caring for the earth.
Thank you, Robin. Priscilla?
I'm Priscilla Durkin. I have lived in Montreat for about 3 years. I am officially retired as a PCUSA Minister of Word and Sacrament. And my interest in Earth Care is, it's never been like a high priority in any committees. I'm not on any committees that are involved in that, but I just grew up with parents who were very concerned about the earth and recycling and gardening and being good stewards of the earth. So it's just an interest of mine, and that's why I'm here.
Thanks, Priscilla. Anna?
Hey, I have actually been visiting at First Pres in Asheville for about 5 months. I've been kind of in between churches for a while, and I've been an organic gardener for about 45 years. Absolutely love everything to do with the earth, the animals, plants, and everything, and was just really curious what you all had to share tonight. So I'm thankful to be here. Thank you for your work.
Well, thank you for venturing forth to spend part of your evening looking at the faces of a bunch of Presbyterians. That can be daunting. Peggy?
Well, I'm a member of Brevard Presbyterian Church here in Brevard, North Carolina, and I'm also interested in earth issues and thought it would be an interesting thing to do this evening, so I'm glad to join you. And I'm also retired, and this is little Heidi, so she always joins in too. Thanks.
Thanks for being here, Peggy. B. I invite you to say something about yourself.
Hello, I'm Bee Manship. I'm chair of the Earth Care Team at Unity Presbyterian in Denver, North Carolina. And we've been going along strongly since about 2015. And our last project was completed this summer, where we put solar panels on our sanctuary and fellowship hall, and are looking forward to trying to get something done and get up and going this fall.
I believe that the Earth Care team of the Presbytery got to see a video that the installation company did of the solar panels there at Unity Church, and that was an impressive thing to see.
Good.
And we're actually hoping to focus on that a little bit when we start our website. I think that was the first church project that we were going to highlight on the website for the Earth Care team.
Good. Thank you.
Kat, we'd like to hear from you, please.
Well, I'm Kat Turbyfield, and I was just happy to see Peggy because I just met her last week in our circle, and I go to Bavard Davidson Presbyterian Church. I really just saw the program and thought it was interesting, and I'm just a mother and a grandmother and a great-grandmother of 7. That's it.
Well, if we were handing out prizes for various categories, you'd get a few of them hands down, I think, Kat. So,
Okay.
but I'm glad you were willing to check this out. This is the first time the team has done this, and we're just kind of making our way, figuring out how to use Zoom effectively, and seeing what we can do to help this presbytery. Linda.
I'm Linda Hobson. I am a member at Montreat Presbyterian Church. I live in Black Mountain. I have spent most of my adult life sitting on the floor with 4-year-olds, and am very passionate about young children, and that leads me to be passionate about what we're doing to this earth and what state we will leave the earth in. We have about a year ago put solar panels on our home, and a brother-in-law said, well, you'll never get your money back out of it. And I said, I didn't do it for that. I did it for my grandchildren. He didn't have a comeback. So I'm just here to not learn.
Well, thanks for joining in. Looking forward to our conversation. I think the only person who has not spoken is Beverly. Am I right about that?
And I think you spoke for me, so, which is interesting, and I appreciate it, actually. George and I are big on environmental issues and have been for years. And before we were married, I've heard lots of his tales of trying to create things out of other things to help the environment. And we're still doing that. If you know anybody that can help us with our pond, spring-fed pond, we sure need help. So that's my PR piece for the night.
Okay.
Well, thank you, everybody. I think we're all still kind of getting used to meeting people this way, rather than walking into a room and shaking hands and doing the small talk. So I'm hoping that by the end of our time together, we'll feel like we've had a chance to share some thoughts, hear from each other, and get a sense of what might be possible as this presbytery-based Earth Care team seeks to help support the ministry of you and of congregations toward the ends that some of you have mentioned already. Before we start our conversation proper, I want to read a selection And no, I am not a medieval historian. I just know where to find books that might have the kind of things I'm looking for. So I want to read just a short paragraph from a Benedictine monk from the 12th century. And the reason I'm doing this is because it helps give us some historical perspective, I think, as Christians when we talk about earth care. This fellow's name was Hugh of St. Victor. He was a theologian and philosopher, did a lot of writing in his time. And this paragraph just struck me as having something to say to us tonight. This whole sensible world is like some book written by the finger of God, that is, created by divine power. Individual creatures are like signs, not invented by humans, but set up by God's good pleasure in order to manifest the invisible things of divine wisdom. A spiritual person who reflects on the exterior beauty of something understands interiorly how marvelous is the Creator's wisdom. Therefore, it is good to contemplate and admire God's works, but only if one knows how to turn the beauty of material things to spiritual profit. I invite us now just to pause for a moment of silence as we think about these words. God, you have made a wonderful creation in which we are a part. May we love it as you do. May we care for it as you do. For Jesus' sake, amen. Well, if you don't mind, I would like to ask you a question. And I hope that all of you who want to answer will take the time to do so. And that question is, when you think about earth care or creation care or environmental sustainability, all that kind of language that I think most of us have become familiar with, when you think about all of that, what is an experience in your life that became a turning point for your interest? What's an experience in your life that really, where you can look back and say, that was a time when I finally realized, or it occurred to me, or something? John?
I guess I'll go. I probably had a different experience from most of you. I had a kind of a growing concern about the environment as I went through my higher education and completing it. And then all of a sudden, through a kind of a novel set of events, I ended up, after years of training in microbiology and the biology of cultured cells and genetics, in a laboratory that was headed by a man who was a pioneer in a field called genetic toxicology, and that's a field that was a branch of the larger field of toxicology, which is the study of poisons, looking at poisons that had their effect by altering our DNA and our genetics. And that ended up getting me into a whole variety of things. And I had a research career studying the effects of chemicals that people were exposed to in their work and that sometimes they're exposed to just in everyday life. And that gradually led me into a kind of a broader concern about human exposure to toxic chemicals in the air. And I was living and working in Galveston, Texas, which is right on the coast south of Houston. And as you may know, Southeast Texas is probably the home of about 25% of the petrochemical refining capacity in the United States. And I was pretty deep into working with that kind of thing, and was finally asked, because I was sort of recognized as an expert, to work with several other people from academic institutions in the Houston area on a major report about the health effects of air pollution in the Houston area. And that certainly kind of nailed down where I was at. So I was not so much coming at this from the point of view of sort of sustainable living and solar panels on the roof and some of those things, but more trying to actually influence policies to reduce the emission of toxic chemicals from industry and improving air quality in that area. And then I moved up here to Western North Carolina, where the air quality is much better than it was in the Houston area, and I enjoy that, but I continue to be concerned about most of the rest of the country that is not so fortunate as we are here in the mountains of Western North Carolina.
Thanks, John. That's probably the most technical response we'll get to that question tonight.
Yeah, I figured it was. That's why I went ahead.
Who else would like to share?
Yeah, George, I've got something for you. I graduated from Oregon State, and I worked my way through school working for a sewer and septic tank contractor, and pretty much a full-time job working afternoons and evenings. But I did graduate as a civil engineer, and during my last year as a senior, I had looked into joining the Peace Corps because I had been working with a sanitary contractor. I volunteered with the Peace Corps to design and install septic systems in an assignment either in Turkey or in Afghanistan. This was in 1966.
Mm-hmm.
When it actually came down to the time to choose a job between the Peace Corps, DuPont, Shell Oil, I went with DuPont. So I didn't go in the Peace Corps. However, my love for an appreciation for sanitary conditions for people to live in has been following me through my international assignments in India, China, Mexico, Brazil. And in all of those cases, in our chemical plants, we were able to put in decent shower facilities, eating facilities, and those kinds of things because of my interest and the quick pickup by the local politicians that it was the right thing to do for the people. So that's been my thrust. Now I'm a gardener that's not using any organic fertilizers or pesticides, and I'm having my battles with the squash beetles. So that's my story.
Thank you, Bill. Who would like to go next?
Well, if no one's jumping in there, I'll go ahead and break the ice. So it's really kind of hard for me to pinpoint a specific instance that kind of was a turning point for me. But because I grew up in Florida, and I played outside all the time, and nature was just my playground. But I do remember an incident when I was in college, and I was going to college in Tampa, Florida, and I was walking back from a class because I lived in a dorm, and it was evening, and it was close to sundown, and I just noticed the sky for like the first time in my life. I noticed the sky, and I just looked all around me, and there was like just this, it was like sunset. It was just like this different view in every direction I looked. And, that in a way was a turning point for me. I think it was a spiritual experience. I felt like I was part of the environment at the time, and even there in college, I was part of a group, and, I forgot what we called ourselves, but I was there for Earth Day. So that explains a lot too. But that I still remember that time when I noticed the sky for like the first time.
It was there all your life, and that one time you finally realized that it was there and it got your attention. Yeah.
I was always looking at the ground, I guess.
Thank you, Jane. Who would like to go next?
Hi, George. This is B. I don't have anything earth-shaking other than our two kids attended a magnet school or magnet schools in Raleigh, and it was through their education and awareness with other kids that they began talking at home, and actually made me more aware of the environmental hazards, I guess, that were beginning to take place. And and that began my pursuit of more information, and then becoming more active as an adult, and continuing that way. Even though our family, when we were growing up, my family, when I was a child, we were very much into nature and being outside, and my father gardened, and he was always very much into making sure that the earth was important to him, and he tried to convey that message to us. But it was the actual in getting active and involved that came with our kids, which is, I think, neat. So anyway, means the younger generation is coming along also, so that's good.
Sometimes we learn from them and we don't even realize it's going to happen. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anna, it looks like you might be ready to say something.
Oh, yeah, I'm also one of those. When I was a kid, I much preferred being outside. I was the first one out the door in the morning, and they had to drag me in at night. It's where I'm happiest, and I think outside is where I've always connected with God the best. I've lived long enough that I'm extremely concerned about the changes that I've seen over my lifetime. Even something as seemingly simple as remembering being a small child and seeing a lilac bush literally covered with butterflies, probably 25 different kinds of butterflies. Now I'm lucky if I see 3 different kinds of butterflies, and maybe just 3 butterflies. I just feel like we've already lost so much, and I really would like to do something to help turn that around.
Your butterfly story kind of resonates with Beverly and me too, at least in terms of this summer and seeing only a few, but at least they're there.
Yeah, and they seem to have come a little bit later this year, so I don't know if that had to do with the weather. We're seeing a little bit more later. than we did earlier.
Well, thank you for giving that for us to hear. Who else? Peggy, if you're talking to us, we can't hear you.
Sorry. I'm a home economist, retired, and I've always been interested in things like saving time, money, and energy, which home ec people do. And I was especially intrigued when the church, Presbyterian Church here, put solar panels on the building and sanctuary, and now we're putting more and more panels on, and how much energy we are saving and money. So it kind of spurred my curiosity more as to this committee and what all's going on here. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Peggy. I certainly don't want to twist anybody's arm to share, but if you want to share an experience from your life that's kind of a moment that helps you look back and realize how your interests got going in earth care, I'd sure be happy for you to share it.
George, I'll share. Thinking about the whole issue of stewardship of the earth is kind of like, to me, if somebody says, when were you saved? I mean, I can't point to a moment like Jane said. My family always was so concerned about the environment. I mean, we didn't peel a potato without putting the peelings on the garden. You know, my mother would recycle aluminum foil till it just crinkled and wouldn't hold anything else. I mean, we were just always into that kind of thing. It was just a whole way of thinking. But one thing that just sort of popped into my mind was when my daughter was, I think she was about 6 years old, and we were in a development in the suburban Maryland outside of DC area. And we were driving to school one morning, and she noticed that all these trees were being cut down because there was a new development being built. And she said, "Oh, Mommy, when I grow up, will there still be trees?" So that just kind of sticks out in my mind when I think about that.
Yeah, that would stick in a mother's mind. It certainly would.
At the risk of giving another technical response to the question, George, for me, when I was teaching in theological schools, my teaching focus was broadly on issues of faith and money, or faith and wealth. But about the time I was headed toward retirement, I took some time on a kind of sabbatical at the end of my teaching career, and at that moment got involved in this was in the early part of around 2010, I guess, in 9-10, and the big issue of peak oil was under consideration, and I got to waxing eloquently about that and how the church had a need to understand that the resources we had for powering our economy, that was a connection to the faith and money piece. Those resources were not infinite. And I worried at the time that we would run out of oil. Now I'm worried that we haven't run out of oil. And that's the real problem, that the use broadly of fossil fuels is what's the single most pernicious factor in creating the climate disruptions and the extinctions and the loss of butterflies and the loss of sea ice and everything else. So that was kind of that changed the trajectory of my teaching since I retired from teaching in theological schools. So the teaching I do now in churches and other places has to do with how we can respond. As some of you have said, how can we be better stewards of the earth that we realize is much more fragile than we than I had been assuming for a long time.
Yeah, I think it was Anna who said she's lived long enough to see changes that have taken place that are, shall we say, not heading in the right direction if you're talking about a healthy planet. Thank you, Cam. Christina, I'm just kind of, do I need to just sort of poke you a little bit to hear something?
Sure. Well, I guess I've been kind of reflecting as everybody's been talking, and I'm hearing, you know, shades of similarities with almost everybody's. Probably not John and Bill, but you know, almost everybody's stories that they've been sharing, and just thinking about, you know, I was like Anna and Jane, kind of a nature girl growing up, and always outside. You know, we always enjoyed traveling to the national parks, and my husband and I have seen a great number of those. And I guess, you know, I've just always kind of had that love for like keeping the earth, you know, clean and pristine, and as nicely as we can keep it so that future generations can enjoy what I've already seen. But I guess some of the things that maybe spurred me on to be a little more concerned was like the Exxon Valdez, and now what we're seeing with pipelines, and just Cam, you were talking about oil, and just so concerned about, you know, how we're gutting the planet, and we're misusing resources that we've got, and you know, we're just spoiling what God has given us, I guess. And you know, not just the stewardship issue, but just taking care of what we've got, so that future generations can enjoy what we've all seen. And I guess I'm probably the youngest one here in the group, but still, I think I've seen enough changes in just my time that it's making me very, very concerned for the future. And we have several nieces and nephews that I'm worried about their safety, you know, more than anything else, worried about their safety, as I'm watching now the wildfires, and the sky is turning orange and red out in the west, and listening to all the wildfires and storms that I know my friends are near, and just being very concerned about all of it. So it's again, not one event, but just hearing it time and time again about what's happening is just made me very, very concerned about all of it.
Yeah, and I guess my one memory for the question that I posed is more of a train of thought over the years. I remember the first Earth Day, and I remember that our school did some stuff. Of course, I was very, very young then, you know, very young. But I do remember thinking, even at that young age, that by the time I was an adult and much farther into my life, that the world was going to be so much different, because we were going to make all these changes that were going to make the planet more sustainable. And we just had the 50th observance of Earth Day this spring, as the pandemic was getting started, and I remember feeling pretty down that week, realizing that we really haven't, as a nation, let alone as a world, done a whole lot to really advance as much as 50 years would have allowed us to do.
I would comment, though, that a couple of things. I have been almost astonished at the speed with which renewable energy has been developed, and serves as a really viable alternative to fossil fuels to provide us the energy we need, particularly electricity. And you're now beginning to see, because of the abundance of ways to produce electricity, that we're really beginning to see electric vehicles as a viable alternative to gasoline-powered vehicles. So there are notable things going on. There's much more critical appraisal of the use of fossil fuels than there used to be. Everybody just sort of assumed that that was the way it was. I remember in around 2000 when Al Gore came out with the documentary that he called An Inconvenient Truth, which for most Americans was probably the first serious introduction to the problems of climate change. Now that's much more widely understood and accepted. So I think we're making progress. I will have to confess, I came out of a family of people who made their living in the chemical industry. And one of my kids, my son, who was a computer geek back when he was a kid in the 1990s and early 2000s, has been playing an increasingly important role in the infrastructure of the computer network system that ExxonMobil relies on every day. So I'm sort of back, I'm the lone wolf in that family lineage. I've got two before me and one after me who are all in the chemical industry in one way or another. But I do think that there's good reason to hope and to persist in seeking better solutions to our problems, particularly with respect to energy and its generation. And I think gradually we're gonna see improvements. I think these last few years have been kind of a setback, but I think people are learning from it and we're going to grow out of it.
I'm glad you sounded a note of hope, John, because I've been reading things lately that run me in the opposite direction. I've just started a book by Mark Linus called 6 Degrees, the real title of which is Our Final Warning. And he wrote a book in 2007 or so called 6 Degrees and predicted climate outcomes that would happen much later than now. But in this book, many of those things have already taken place now.
Yep.
And with even with the Paris Accord, which we've withdrawn from, the accord was fine, but the commitments that countries made weren't up to the goals of the accord. So
right.
There's a whole lot of work that's got to be done.
Oh, we absolutely have much work to do. And, you know, we can think about environmental concerns, as many of us do, at a very local level. And we can think about it in a more global level. And I suppose because of my academic background, I tend to think more globally about it. But it's important to think about what you can do in your home. You know, even if you don't invest in solar panels and things like that, you can find ways to keep your energy use down and to do other things that promote environmental sustainability, and we should promote that.
Well, thanks for adding to our conversation, Jonathan. Some days things look good, and other days they look, you know, that's kind of like what that one step forward, 2 steps back kind of experience. Yeah. I have another question that I'm curious to pose, and this is the kind of question where if it works well, you're thinking about it when you fall asleep tonight or fall asleep tomorrow night, you know, kind of thing. So I'm going to go ahead and pose it with the not with any expectation that everything we say tonight is going to be profound and earth-shattering. but it can help us continue to think. And the question is, how is your faith related to your awareness of the natural world? How is your faith related to your awareness of the natural world? If you don't mind me sharing a quick story, when I got out of seminary, my first church call was in the Denver area, and I lived there for a while. But then I moved on and was back in Oregon where I grew up. And then a few years later, I ended up in the Chicago area and blah, blah, blah. But at one point, I ended up flying kind of around the Midwest and to the Denver area for some of what I was doing in my work. And every time the plane would start to land at the Denver airport, you could see the Front Range because we were flying from Chicago west. And those moments, being able to see out the window and see the Front Range as we were heading down, for me have a sensation inside of me that I never really been able to find words for. The sense of the immensity of the mountains, the sky behind them, the Great Plains as they move away from the east, from the foot of the mountains, and this sense of the immensity and beauty of the world, and that I'm sitting up there in this little tiny plane looking at a little tiny window, kind of trying to soak it all in. And for me, that's kind of a way of helping me not so much articulate an answer to the question I just posed you, but I guess to express an awareness of how they come together for me, at least have in different ways over my life.
George, you're saying that, that's Robin, saying that about the mountains reminded me of an experience. We lived in Alaska for a while, and we got to see on maybe one day a month, we would get to see the top of Mount McKinley from where we lived. And I realized that it's like God, because even though you can't always see God, God is always there, just like Mount McKinley is. And occasionally the clouds clear and you can see and know that God's there.
It's a great metaphor, Robin. Anna, I'm waiting for you to talk about your gardening.
Oh gosh. Well, I said before, you know, when I'm outside, that's where I connect with God. I can't look at anything that God has made and not see Him. It's not possible for me. Whether it's, you know, being in the West Indies, which I did on a trip as a high schooler, and snorkeling underwater inside a school of incredible fish, or looking at a grasshopper that's living on a plant on my front step. The beauty and the complexity of what God has created, it just shouts him all over. You know, to get up. I get up before the sunrise every morning and to sit outside and to look at the stars. It just amazes me. To me, I see God in everything he's created. So for me, to be outside, to be in nature is worship.
Mm.
I think I get that. What other thoughts do you have on this question?
What? I'm sorry, I kind of didn't miss the question. I missed the question because a call I was anticipating came in and I had to take it.
John, I asked, how is your faith related to your awareness of the natural world?
Ah. Well, has everybody else told you the answer?
Everybody's being shy right now.
Oh,
They
well,
remind me of Varys and Keeler's Norwegian bachelor farmers. You know, they don't say much.
right. Well, I don't want to monopolize, so I'll let somebody else try to answer that and maybe come in later.
Well, I'll go ahead and preface mine with a story. I think this was about 2000, the year 2000, and I was living in Houston, working for Mothers for Clean Air that Jonathan mentioned. And one of the board members, I guess, came to me one time and said, "Jane, do you happen to be Presbyterian?" And I said, "Well, yes, I am. Why do you ask?" And he said, "Well, there's a conference about faith in the environment. I think it was in Chicago." And he said, "And we have money to send someone, and I just wondered if you'd like to go." So I went to this conference, never having put my faith together with the environment, both of which were my passions. And I came back and I go, "Oh my gosh, how did I miss this for so many years?" And you know, I feel like I'm a lot like Anna in that I see God in all of creation. For example, when I'm heading north on Fairview Road, which you probably don't know where it is, but anyway, I get this tremendous view of the mountains, and it changes every time I look at it. The lighting is different, the coloring is different. It's just, the clouds are different, and it just fills me up, you know, and I don't know what this filling up feeling is, if it's peace or if it's awe or joy, but you know, it happens every time I see that view, and it's just, it's so, I feel it's so connected with God, and God is the creator.
I think I get that one, Jane. Yeah.
Well, and we are so very fortunate. You know, I didn't feel this way a whole lot when I lived in Houston. I can admit that. But you know, it's like all around you here, all around, and yeah, and you don't smell it either, so that's good.
I'm guessing that others of you have similar stories and you've had similar experiences, and if you're like me, those experiences can come and then just sort of dissipate rather quickly because there's so many other things going on in our lives. But hopefully they can stick with us one way or another. Anybody else before we start winding things down here?
Well, I guess I can offer one more thing. My education as a Presbyterian has been that the chief scriptural guidance we have from Jesus, which he took from Isaiah, was that we're to love God and love one another. And it's hard to love one another if we're not respectful of the kind of environment we're living in. And a thing I got acquainted with through the work I was doing, and it was oddly not through my church, it was through my work. And that was that I had some involvement with a program at the EPA that's called environmental justice. They had an environmental justice program. And through kind of a combination of that and some of the work I was doing in the Houston area, I really became better acquainted with the fact that people's exposures to the kinds of environmental hazards that I was concerned about were not equal. That by and large, lower income, minority people, particularly in the east side of Houston, Hispanics, were much more exposed to environmental pollutants and the hazards and other hazards. And that really made me think about the role of justice and kind of that application of faith about loving one another. So that was kind of a key thing.
Yeah, I taught at an African American seminary for 14 years, and environmental issues, the way we often think about them and talk about them, were not the primary focus for the students and their churches. It was what you just mentioned, John. It was environmental justice. It was what happens to poor communities when things that are used in our economy get put somewhere and can be harmful. There's a lot of work to be done there. It reminds me of that movie. And maybe, Jane, you can remember the name of the guy in that little company who's Presbyterian related, who's doing those movies, the one on Flint, the water in Flint, and he's got a newer one now. I'm just blanking out, but he was at the event last fall at Montreat. I just can't remember the details, but those are the kinds of documentaries that help us realize that not everybody gets treated equally when it comes to environmental challenges.
George,
George, you got muted somehow.
Okay. I thought I hit the button and I missed it. Okay. We scheduled this to go for an hour, and I don't see anybody jumping to say anything more right now. So we'll go ahead and wind things up. Just reminding you that this is the first time that the Presbyterian's Earth Care team has hosted something like this. We're hoping that this can become a way that the various congregations in the Presbytery and people who are members of churches who have this passion for earth care can find a way to stay connected and support each other, share ideas, and so forth, especially during this time where we can't meet face to face very easily. But certainly because of the distance that the presbytery covers, it is efficient to be able to meet this way. The Earth Care team will debrief this meeting, and we hope to hold another one, and we've got your names and email addresses, and hope that we can stay in touch with you, and are hoping that this can be something that grows and provides an important contribution to the life of this presbytery and the life of this part of the state and the world around us. So thank you all for coming. Hope you have a pleasant evening, and we hope to stay in touch. And if I had some clever little environmental slogan, I would just pop it in here at the end. But nothing's coming to mind right now. And don't forget Hugh of St. Victor and his comments.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Kat, thanks for coming.
I enjoyed hearing everyone. It has been a good hour for me. Okay.
Good. Good.
Thank you all
Yeah.
for participating with us.
Yes, thank you.
Appreciate it, everybody.
And we'll get back together again sometime, okay?
I'd love that. Thank you.
Okay. Have a good night, everyone.
Bye.
Night.
Bye.
Good night.